to episode 36 of Destination Talk. I'm John Paz.
And I am Harry, and we are coming to you once again from Chop Studios, located at 750 Route 34 in Mattawa, New Jersey. And a big shout out and a thank you to our show sponsor, the Academy in Garwood. Check them out on their website at academysportsnj.com. Today we are joined by Donnie DeFilippis, former collegiate wrestler and owner of Yale Street Wrestling Club. Donnie, thank you for coming in studio. It's great to finally get you in here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How's everything going?
Going good. You know, it's, what are we, mid-September now? We just got back from a competition out in Pennsylvania last weekend. Team did really well. High school team won. K through 8 team was top 3. So we started the school year off really, really well. And we got 2 big competitions coming up, Journeyman and Super 32. So we're right in the swing of things right now.
We'll definitely dive into that. I've seen your facility in Piscataway. It's a wonderful place. You run things a little old school.
Yeah,
A little old school. We'll touch on that a little bit too. I think we're going to get into some interesting topics in this conversation today. Mm-hmm. But before we go to the controversial stuff, let's talk about a little bit who Donnie is. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself? You know, why wrestling? How'd you end up there?
So wrestling wasn't always my number one sport. Baseball was my number one sport as a kid up until 7th grade. And then when 7th grade, back then they didn't have, you know, the way baseball is now. You got your 50-70, then they go to the big diamond, 60-90. We didn't have all that. It was just a jump from Little League to, you know, the big diamond. And I was a catcher. I loved being involved in every play. And when I got to the big diamond, I'm a little guy. I couldn't make that throw to second base, so I lost my starting job, and they were going to put me in the field somewhere, and I was like, I don't want to play the field after catching so many years. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to wrestle. There's tournaments I could go to. I can still wrestle in the summertime, and that's when I started getting good at wrestling. I was only maybe a one-time state qualifier up until as a little kid. I think the first year I qualified for states was 6th grade. So 7th grade, I made it. I didn't win a match at states. And then I started wrestling in the summer, and that's when I started getting really good.
Mm-hmm. So you have Yale Street. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, how did that come about?
So that happened very organically. I got out of college. I wrestled Division I at George Mason and then transferred to Rutgers and finished my career there. And then right out of college, I started coaching. I started coaching New Providence High School, where I graduated from. I won a state title there in '99. 2005 was my first year coaching. I coached there from 2005 to 2009. And then 2009, in between there, I got a job. I started a job as a police officer. So I went to the police academy in 2007 and started working as a cop in 07 in Summit, which is the neighboring town to New Providence where I grew up. And then after New Providence, I coached at Brearley. In 2009, so I was at New Providence 05 to 08. 09, I went to Brearley. And then in 2010, I started dabbling in mixed martial arts, Jiu-Jitsu, and started training with Kurt Pellegrino and Ryan Vicaro down the shore. Obviously, Frankie Edgar's somebody that, you know, I grew up competing against and know Frankie really well. And so when I saw him, you know, having all the success he was having, I was like, you know, I got to try this, you know, and because I was training with Kurt and everything, I was in those gyms. So I did that from 2010 to 2012. I fought professionally in 2011, did a bunch of grappling tournaments back then, and then, you know, had success. I won the one professional fight that I had, and I was thinking about, you know, continuing that as a career. And then my wife, Joanna, got pregnant with our firstborn son, Dominic, and I was like, maybe I should go back to, because I had the job as a cop, so I didn't want to get hurt and stuff. So I went back to coaching. I coached at Bound Brook from 2012 to 2015, for 2012 to 2014. 2015, I coached in Summit. During that time is when we started Yale Street. So 2013, we started Yale Street. I moved into my house in Summit in 2012. We developed, I made my 2-car garage, which is detached from the house, a wrestling room. Dan Hilt and I are very good friends. He's one of my best friends. We were teammates at Rutgers. And Dan was coaching and working with kids. So he used my garage to do some private lessons. I was doing private lessons. Craig Dela Cruz was one of our first members. He was a 2-time state champ at Bound Brook, and then he finished, we made it to state finals in 2015 with Summit. And so during that time period, Dan was working with a bunch of guys, and Dan's like, hey man, I got some guys that I think you can help. And I was like, well, I have some guys that you can help. So we combined it, and then we made it into a, hey, if you're gonna work with Dan, you have to work with Donnie. If you're gonna work with Donnie, you have to work with Dan. And that was the whole concept. And it was like we're coaching on a unified front, and that's how we formed the Yale Street Wrestling Club.
We spent a lot of times in those garages growing up.
Yeah, we did.
I think, can we go back a little bit into your years of how you got into youth wrestling and what the difference is now to what it is when you were, growing up?
Yeah. So my first kid states, since I was in the kid states, I think that I was in 8th grade in 1995. The kid states were at Lakewood High School. I took 4th. That was the highest I ever placed. I think that was the only time I ever placed in the kid states was in 8th grade. I took 4th. The very next year, I was in the high school state finals. I don't think you see a jump like that these days because kids are the sport has evolved so much. Kids are training and so well trained, and it's hard to make a jump like that now. But now, my first youth states back, which was 95 to 2016, so 21 years, was when you were in 8th grade and when you made the state finals.
Yep.
And that's when we were in Trenton at the Cure Insurance Arena. And it was like a mini Atlantic City arena. And that's when you looked at it and like, wow, the kids' states are kind of mimicking Atlantic City. And the level of wrestling was much higher than I remembered it. Even now, my own children are in it. We're 10 years past your kids' states. This is coming up on 2026. So my kids have wrestled in that tournament a number of times. My older son won it the first time he went in it. My younger son took second the first time he went in it. And so they've had some success there. And the way I like to describe it, and Dominic, my older son, is in 7th grade now. And if you watch Dominic wrestle now and you compare those videos, even Anthony, and Anthony's younger, he's 10, but he's very good. And you watch those videos of them and compare them to when I won a high school state title in 1999, they are better now than I was then, technically. It's incredible. I mean, I look at, especially, Dominic is older, so wrestling at a higher level. I think he would tech fall me when I was a senior in high school, pound for pound. So it's pretty incredible.
So the difference in technique has evolved so much. Can you talk a little bit about that and how wrestling has evolved just from a technique standpoint and just everything else?
Yeah. So there's a couple of factors involved, and you'll be able to understand this because you went through it. Number one. Is just, specialization. It's happening in every sport, right? So more people are wrestling all year round from a very young age. Number two, clubs. In New Jersey, there's clubs everywhere. Right. When we first started Yale Street, it wasn't nearly as many clubs as there are today. So it's definitely getting more competitive from a business standpoint for us. But it's also good for the kids. The level of wrestling is getting higher because you have higher level coaches everywhere. Let's see. I was getting to the technique. The technique has evolved. I mean, jiu-jitsu has helped with that. Scrambling, leg passing, all that stuff, that came from jiu-jitsu. So, that type of stuff where the funk and the scrambling and the technique has evolved, and now you have more high-level coaches in a condensed area coaching that level of technique to these younger kids, and they're doing it all year round. That all those three things combined is why wrestling is so, so harder and more competitive and just at a higher level now at such a young age. Again, these kids are wrestling at a level now that D1 guys were wrestling at 20 years ago.
One of the things I've noticed in the last 5 or 6 years and, across different sports is also too, like, I believe you have a guy at your club, Jake Zeminski.
Jake Zemsky.
Sorry, I didn't get his name wrong. He's getting ready for a football game this afternoon as we speak right now. But here's a guy, strong kid, big kid, football player who then translates it over into wrestling. Do you see the benefits of an individual who participates in both those sports?
Yeah, I mean, they go hand in hand. I think wrestling makes you a better football player, and I think there are aspects of football that can make you a better wrestler as far as like toughness goes, and getting hit and not being afraid of that type of stuff toughens your body up.
I also think that the hand fighting too, depending on the position you play in football, is helpful.
Definitely, yes, especially with linemen. Right. And I mean, I saw a video on Instagram the other day of a professional football player that they were training in wrestling. He was actually in a wrestling room doing wrestling drills because they thought it was going to help him with his tackling.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say, you can still do it. I mean, especially if you're an upper weight, you can still be a top level wrestler in the country and play football. But it is harder now. It is harder. Right. I mean, you go, if you're playing football, you're probably going to miss the biggest tournament in the country, which is the Super 32. You're going to miss the Journeyman. You're going to miss those preseason tournaments that the guys that are going to those tournaments are going to have an advantage, towards the end of the year. So there are some downfalls to it because specialization has kind of taken over, especially at that age.
And I think that was one of the biggest challenges that the kid from Iowa has dealt with, because he's gone back and forth between the football.
Who's that? Which one?
Was he the heavyweight for them?
The heavyweight, Ben Kuttner.
He was playing both,
he was
right?
playing football,
He
and then
was
went to
doing
wrestle,
both, but I believe he committed to football this year because it's just a different. Listen, we're talking about Big Ten sports here, but this very different for him. He had to make a commitment to one versus the other.
The heavyweight from Nebraska also was playing football and then went to wrestling halfway through the year. I think that was like another example.
Yeah,
it's really tough to do that.
Yeah, I think only
Especially
heavyweights is like the guys that can really do that.
Right.
Let's go back to Yale Street a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about how it went from the garage to Brawl House to now where we are now? Kind of like just the whole trajectory of how the club got to where you are now.
So I told you a story about Dan and I. That's how we started. And then in 2013, we started doing that in the garage. In 2014, I was approached by Chris Jordan and Dave Martin, who started a business called Brawl House, where the concept was everything under one roof: jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, strength training. Well, it was CrossFit and wrestling. And so I had, I knew that Dan and I were running the garage, so I couldn't be in two places at once. So we started at Brawl House. I had Shane Mallory and Craig Frost working with me there. And what we saw was, and that's how we met John. John was at Brawl House, and what we had going on there is we had these private lessons at Yale Street in the garage, and then we had studs in those groups. And then when we did Brawl House, our room was really light. It was really light there, and we didn't have as many good kids in that room. And I wanted some kids that were in the garage at Yale Street to be in Brawl House working with him. And so it was kind of divided. And so what we decided was after a year or two, we're like, look, we're going to make it so that if you want to do private lessons with us, you have to join our club. And that is where we got the whole mutual commitment model from. And that is very rare. I'm telling you right now, we were the first ones to do it. And I don't know how many people are still doing it today. I don't think there's many clubs that require you to join to do private lessons. And the concept behind that was, why? Number one, we want to get everybody training together. But number two, if you don't have enough confidence in us to join our club, why would we do private lessons with you? Right. And I've turned down state champs. I've turned down high level high school, high ranked high school kids because of that. And it's very interesting how that whole concept, like parents are just like, some parents just don't want to commit. They're afraid of committing to a program, and that's what we required. We don't just do drop-ins. We wanted people to join the club. So the drop-ins we do on Sundays because we can wrestle live and give our kids different looks, and kids that are from other programs that want to come in and get different looks, we do that now. But during the week is when we do the majority of our teaching. And I don't want some random kid, I don't care how good he is, to come in and get attention. That attention needs to be on our members. Mm-hmm. So that's how we got that concept. And then Dave Martin and Chris Jordan had a falling out, and then Dave left Brawl House and started Yeti MMA. And that's where we ended up having Yale Street become unified and one place. And we still have the garage. We still have the garage today. We still do privates there. And so that's John. Obviously, when you were with us at Brawl House, you were with us when we went to Yeti, and we had some very good years there.
Those videos I used to see of you in the past in the garage. Is that where you were at?
Yep.
With Shane.
Yep.
Like when you would roll with Shane.
Some videos are in the garage with Shane. Then we also had the little back room at Yeti. It was kind of like me and Shane's little corner.
Little cutout there.
Yeah, we would be in there, and we would have a lot of really good memories in those areas.
If you had to describe the culture at Yale Street, what would you say it is?
Well, it's grown a lot. I mean, at first I would say it was family. It was all about family. Everybody felt like they were a part of the family. And that's been hard to continue that as the club has grown. Now we have over 200 members. We still try to keep that family type atmosphere. And we do have it to a certain extent. But the one thing I'm leery of is I don't want our club to turn into a club where people think that there's like cliques and there's in groups, and some people don't feel like they're a part of the in group. Like, I don't want that. I think that happens sometimes naturally when you have a lot of people and groups of people. But the coaching staff pretty much, I think we exemplify what we want our program to be, and we all coach together. And I saw a lot of things from clubs. I'm not going to mention names, but before we started or when we first started, there were a lot of clubs that I learned from the mistakes that they were making.
Right.
And those coaches were jumping on top of other coaches. They wanted to be the guy. They want to be the guy. You do privates with me. And they were stealing privates from each other, and they were trying to take credit.
Right.
What we do at Yale Street is, me being a head coach, when somebody tells me that they prefer, I like this coach better than that coach or whatever, I don't want to get involved in that. But if somebody tells me that coach is great, that coach on that staff is great, I take pride in that because that's our program.
Right.
That's our program. That's a program that Dan Hilt and I, started. And so if you really like that coach, and that means you love our program. And that's the way I take it, where I think a lot of clubs mess up. And what I've seen is that the egos get involved and they want to be the guy. And it's because sometimes it's hard in an individual sport like wrestling to turn off that ego.
Right.
Like you to get the drive to be great, you have to have somewhat of an ego and be self-driven and a little selfish. And you have to evolve as a person when you become a coach and realize it's not about you anymore. And that's why I kind of laugh when I see like people will come up to me like, oh, when we first started, they were like, you got to get a DeFilippis trained. I'm like, no, I'm not going to put my name on it. It's not about me. It's about the wrestler. And I don't have anything against those guys that do. I'm not judging them negatively, but for me personally, it didn't feel right,
And there's a parallel too to the world I find myself in, because it's very similar when you're working with athletes. And I think that was my evolution when I first broke into the business, is that you kind of are looking for that person that you can kind of hang your hat on, but then as you evolve, if you allow yourself to evolve, you realize that that'll come in due time. But if you're there to help everyone, that's the bigger picture.
Yep. Yeah, and like I say this in the police academy, because I've been running. I ran the self-defense at the Union County Police Academy for about 5 years, and I've been teaching there for 13 years. And I always say this to the recruits, like, as long as your intentions are good,
right,
then you can justify your actions. And if you made a mistake, you made a mistake. That's okay. But if you have good intentions, no one's going to say anything about that,
100%.
So, and I think the same goes for coaching. Like, you really have to care about helping the kids, and then good things happen.
And that's why I prefer coach over trainer, because coaching is it's a more intimate feel. Again, I'm not looking to knock anyone, but a trainer can just go on YouTube and find some videos and throw some stuff out there. But I think a coach puts his or her heart and soul into it.
Well, it's developing a relationship with the kid, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like, that's what a coach is.
100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little about your recruiting process and when you were going through it, going to George Mason, then to Rutgers?
Yeah. I mean, I always say this to our kids too. I regret not wrestling freestyle on a national level. I mean, I went to some local tournaments in the spring. I just didn't understand it, and I wasn't really we didn't have as many coaches back then. And my dad never wrestled, so he didn't know any better. And I just didn't like it, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do it because I don't like it. Now, at least, now we can guide people. Now I'm telling people, you have to wrestle freestyle. Like, if you want to get to the next level, you have to wrestle freestyle. I didn't. So that affected me a little bit in the recruiting process. George Mason, I chose George Mason. It was between George Mason and the University of Missouri. And the University of Missouri at the time, Brian Smith was in his first year. He's still the head coach at Missouri, and he turned that program into a powerhouse, a national powerhouse. You had your Ben Askrens come through, right? Like, that was right after he was recruiting me. So I look back on that and I regret not making that decision. I think I should have went to Missouri. I was afraid to travel. I was afraid to go far away. And I also took George Mason because they gave me a full scholarship, where Missouri was offering me 90%. And so that was stupid of me to make the decision based on that. Obviously I think my wrestling career would have ended up a lot different if I was in the Big 12. They were in the Big 12 at the time and in that program. But I mean, listen, I was a round away from All-American as a true freshman coming out of a program like George Mason, which I think it's pretty rare for that. Like, your true freshmen that do well usually come from big time programs. Right. So it was, I mean, I'm proud of that, but I look back on it, and when I blew my knee out my sophomore year, I was ranked 5th in the country at took 2nd at Midlands, ranked 5th in the country, seeded 5th at NCAAs. I was winning in the wrestlebacks, on my way to hopefully placing high, and I blew my knee out on the mat in the middle of the match. I had to get carried off the arena floor at Carver Hawkeye Arena. It was the last time the NCAAs were on a college campus in Iowa. I wasn't taking that into consideration. Like, when you have a big injury like that, you need a supporting cast to come back And being at a small school like George Mason, they just didn't have the resources, you know. And I also, you know, I have a lot to blame for myself as well for the choices that I made at that time. But looking at comparing then till now, it's like I don't even know what I'm looking at now. I don't even know what college sports is anymore. I don't know what's going to happen when my kids get there. And I would never want to be, and you see all this is another reason why the parents are just getting that much crazier nowadays because of the money that's involved and what they're not looking at full scholarships anymore. They're looking at $1 million contracts. And like, you can't get, like with my kids getting to the point where they're, you know, middle school and, you know, getting good at wrestling and looking really good, looking like they're going to be, I would never want to put that pressure on them. I don't even want to think like that. You know what I mean? Like if we can use this to get a good education, I'm still on that, you know, plane. But man, it's, I mean, you know, because it changed while you were in the middle of it.
Yeah, going into college, the best I can get was a, you know, full ride.
Right.
And that's the, you know, once I got that, I was, you know, really happy. And then midway through college, it's like, oh, NIL's here. You know, it's like the wild, wild west. We talk about this all the time. Harry has a lot of opinions about, you know, NIL and college recruiting. So
listen, you know, I wish it were around when I was playing, you know, when I was there, because I do feel that it's beneficial to some extent. I just think it's completely out of hand because, you know, we brought up on a previous episode, you know, like the Arch Manning situation, you know, again, you know, his team is winning at that point, but you know, he's not playing well, but he's got millions in the bank. Now, listen, he might not be the best example because of who his family is.
Well, yeah.
You know, but at the same time, too, if this kid doesn't see it down in the NFL, I don't think he's going to ever hurt for anything.
Which is crazy. And, you know, like I was just watching a podcast. Mike Malanconico has a good podcast. It's called Athlete or Podcast. And he had Tion Ware on. Tion Ware was an NCAA champ for Oklahoma. Actually won my weight one year. And he's a head coach now. I think he took the job wherever Troy Nickerson, I think, was it? I think it was, it's where, what's his name? Alirez went, Northern Colorado. I think he took Northern Colorado job. And he was saying you should never give money to an incoming freshman. You just don't know if that kid's going to pan out. No matter how good they were, no matter where they are on the big board, you don't know if they're going to pan out in college.
Well, until you step onto the mat. And, you know, I've shared this before. Prior to meeting John, I know we don't bring his name up on the show, but I will today. You know, our good friend Mike Amoroso.
Oh, the Ammo.
You know, Mike Ammo. You know, I worked with Mike, and that's how I got to meet John, because I worked with Mike when he was still competing, and then, you know, and then the way we all know how Mike can be, and he, you know, he sent me a text and he sends me these articles, and I got this kid, and he needed to fix his feet. He's going to work with you, and you know. And he came in and handed me like a folder full of things, like I was doing a research project on John.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, that was it. You know, because it's the way that the sport has changed so much. You know, whether it's scoring. You know, you were talking about earlier. Like one of the things that I've noticed in the last 5 years is scoring. You know, the 3-point takedown and you know, a 3-point takedown and a reversal or when your shoulder's nearly pinned, but you're not pinned. Near fall. Sorry. You know, a takedown and a near fall, that's 7 points right away. It's completely changed the way the game is, the sport is being performed. So, you know, it's definitely it has changed in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you coach your athletes, starting from when they're young to when they get older at Yale Street? How kind of the big picture behind that?
Yeah. So we always, and you remember this because when we were at Brawl House, they put John's picture up because he was like fourth in the kid states or something, and I was like, take that down. We're not celebrating kid states because we want to build our program around our high school kids, and we want the little kids to look up to the high school kids and know that that's where it counts. That's what matters. You know, high school and college. And so if we start celebrating little kid stuff, you know, that's going to take away from that. And the same goes for my kids. I mean, you know, we give awards out, age level appropriate awards each year, but we all know, like the high school kids, that we give a Hall of Fame to our high school kids, not to our little kids. And so the whole long, big picture of things is about that and about having your best years be in high school and college. It's getting more and more difficult to do that because it's the parents that are involved are just more and more difficult. And you're going to probably hear me talk about that all the time, more so in this podcast than years past or any podcasts that I've done in the past. The gains that we make in the training room, I've watched it over the years, and I'm still watching it now. Those improvements that we make, both physically and mentally with these kids, sometimes get wiped away on the car ride home or at the dinner table. And some parents just can't help themselves. And it's very unfortunate because we pour our heart and soul into these kids, and I lose sleep over getting these kids better sometimes. And, you just see parents over and over just disregard your advice and just make the wrong decisions. Now, people talk about Paz. We always use him as an example. And Paz reached the highest level as a high school athlete in New Jersey, as a high school wrestler, #1 pound for pound, #2 in the country, or could have been #1 in the country. And the reason why is because not only was he, worked hard, right? He worked hard. He was confident, but he was committed to his coaches. His parents did not get in the way. His parents did everything they could to not get in the way. They were like, well, what do you guys think we should do? And they did everything. They ran everything by us, and they did everything that we suggested. And so that's just very rare. It's so rare nowadays. And
well, when I first met John, your dad came to the first 2 workouts. Your mom showed up for the 3rd one. I think she was more intimidating than your dad was on the 3rd one. But after that,
she's intimidating.
Yeah, but very sweet. But after that, that was it. Like his dad, Big John would just say, "Hey, you got his number. Talk to him.
Yeah,
just call him up and you deal with it. And if you need me for anything, then come get me." He says, "But he's like your dad told me many times. This is between you two.
Yeah,
you figure it out."
I try to get I've had kids that have been with me since they were 8, 9, 10 years old, and now they're 16. And now it's like you try to tell I shouldn't have to text the parents anymore. Right. I'm making plans with the kids. I'm doing this and planning private lesson times and doing this. It's now they're old enough. They should be able to do that. I shouldn't have to go through the parents anymore. And it's just getting harder and harder to do that. As these generations go on, I don't know what it is, but it seems like there's just less and less parents that are willing to relinquish control and always want to be involved and always want to be, and they just make it difficult, for us to do what we need to do as coaches. But the ones that we have. The ones that we have had in our program that have been able to do that, we've had success with them. We've had a lot of success with them, with the John Poznanskis and the Logan Wadles of the world. Right. And, Logan's dad was a great wrestler. He was a 2-time high school state place winner, state semifinalist. He runs everything through us. He's you know what I mean? Like, I have parents that never wrestled that don't run anything by us. It's like, all right, well, now you want to make this decision, and it was the wrong decision, and you see the result, and now you want us to clean it up.
Right.
And it's harder for us to do that.
The sport is physically demanding. I think even more mentally demanding because it's a team sport with an individual component. Mm-hmm. And I've used this example before. Your team can lose 9 out of 10 matches, but if you won your match, you kind of go home happy because you were successful. How do you approach that? I saw your interview with Gene Zanetti on Wrestling Mindset. I know this was a big topic there too, but how do you go about approaching that, and how do you kind of you don't dance around too many things, I have to say. You're pretty straightforward. But how do you balance that sometimes?
So, that's a great question. I one of the things that I talk about a lot with the kids, and we hit on this earlier. We talked about how you kind of got to be a little selfish to be successful in these sports.
Yeah, I think you have to have a level of arrogance to be at the top.
Yeah,
I do agree with that.
You do a swag, so to speak.
Right.
But Walter Payton, okay, I know you remember Walter Payton. Maybe some younger kids don't remember him. He was one of the greatest running backs that ever lived.
Got screwed out of a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Okay. Which one, 85?
Yeah, when they gave it to Fridge.
Oh, they gave it to the Fridge. That's right.
Harry remembers everything.
Yeah.
The littlest things.
Yeah, that's right. He's one of the greatest running backs that ever lived. In his Hall of Fame speech, Walter Payton, who has passed, by the way.
Yes, he has.
Yeah, may he rest in peace. He spoke in his Hall of Fame, induction speech, and he said, look, the best comment that anybody can give to me is that I was a good teammate. So this is one of the greatest running backs of all time. and he didn't make it about himself.
Right.
He said, I am more proud of the fact that I can be here and my teammates who you might not know their name say Walter Payton was a great teammate. So I try to get that message across to the kids. And that's not only about, like cheering your teammates on, but being there to help them if they need you. Like if they're cutting weight and they need somebody to come with them and work out with them, or sit in the sauna with them, or wake up in the morning and work out with them, whatever it is, or get to the tournament early so they could drill and get their warm up in. But also, nowadays, one thing that I've seen is that it's almost like human nature, and it's really a dark side of human nature. But a lot of kids and I had a teammate like this in college, and I didn't like it. But it's almost like, you see, if I don't succeed, I don't want anybody else to succeed. And that is really dangerous. And I don't like that in a program. And if I sense that in my program, I'll call it out right away. And a lot of it, again, comes from the parents, right? Like a lot of the parents start to get competitive with each other, and there's a phoniness involved. It's like that. There's no room for that in our program. Like and the way I look at it, I teach my kids this too. My group of friends, if my friend succeeds, that makes me look good. There's no reason why I should be rooting for him to not succeed, to make myself look better, because that's not healthy. And it doesn't bring about good energy either. Like there is an energy in the universe, and there's a power of good energy. And if you have good energy, good energy is going to get attracted to you. Right. If you have negative energy, then that's what you're going to attract. So, those are messages we try to get across to the kids. But it is tough, man. It is tough,
It's challenging because, we've talked about this before. You have kids, say, like where your two boys are right now, maybe more at the top of their age brackets or their game, and then it carries on into high school, and if they continue to work hard and develop, they'll stay there. Once you get to college, everyone's good on an equal level.
Yeah.
And you're seeing guys from the non-traditional schools that you don't think of, but you get a guy like Parker Kekheisen, was at
UNI.
Yep. He didn't wrestle in the Big Ten, which I arguably think is one of the best, if not the best, conferences in the country for wrestling. But here's this guy was a national champ. He was in the finals a couple of times. But you're going up against guys that are working just as hard, if not harder, than you.
Yeah.
And I don't think. Well, just because you're good at 13 or 14 does not mean it's going to translate to 19, 20, or 21.
Yeah, but also, you're even more so coming from, you have these little 8, 9, 10-year-old kids that are like multiple time state champs.
Right.
And you're looking the way that they're wrestling, what they're winning with. And to the naked eye, they can't see it. Like, the average parent that might have wrestled in high school and had a good 20-win record or whatever, you can't see what our staff can see.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that once everybody hits puberty, you're not going to be able to just run that armbar on a guy anymore.
No, and I think it's fair at that point. There are kids that are just better physically at that 100%. Point in time, and those are the guys that win. But then it's, what does that individual do when their peers catch up to them?
Well, that's the thing. That's why you don't want that success. You don't want to have all that success so early.
Right.
But the same can be applied to high school and college too. There's guys that peak in high school, and then when they get to college, they're burnt. Or they think I could almost make the argument for me, I took second in the state as a freshman. When I won the state title my senior year, I was like, oh my God, I reached the top.
Right.
I finally got that thing that I couldn't get for 3 years.
Right.
And I thought that was it. And, back then, to in my defense, we didn't have the coverage of college wrestling that they have now. There was no Flow Wrestling. There was no Big Ten Network. So I didn't know nothing about college wrestling. And when I got to college and I started getting beat up in my room, that's the first time I ever really got beat up in a wrestling room by my own teammates. And then I started reassessing these goals. And then I went to travel, and I got here and lost there, and kept losing and kept winning, and had, some good wins and some bad losses. And you get to the NCAAs, and then you get close to being an All-American. You're like, oh, this is what I need to shoot for now. And you do reassess the goals. Some kids aren't able to do that. Some kids just were so good. Like, there's a lot of kids that I know coming out of New Jersey, 3-time state champs, didn't do nothing in college. Right. They never even made it to NCAAs.
Well, and that's what makes his run even more impressive, because there was a gradual build up to that state championship. And then, granted, the first year was crazy for everybody at that point in time, but he was able to carry that to the Big Tens, to the national stage, and kept developing. Like I said, the sport's very physical. So, you have to navigate a lot of different things going through that. But you are correct, because I had heard something a long time ago that, you talking about, you give out a scholarship to a kid who's 18 or 19 years old because he's the best at that moment. But how do we know if that kid hasn't already peaked?
Yeah, right.
Because their peak could be their senior year, and then there's this complete fall off. But then you got those kids that fly under the radar that then, they call them the Cinderella story, but maybe they developed a little bit later.
Yeah. Totally, especially in a good program.
Right.
Oh yeah.
With John, I mean, the such a unique situation. We can have a whole nother podcast on my opinions about COVID and all that stuff. You know, but as far as what they did and how they responded to it was awful. But with John, he came out the gate, had 5 college matches, not really a full year of training either, right? Took 3rd in the Big Ten, and then took 4th at the NCAA. And if you look at his NCAA tournament that year, his variety of attacks were so dynamic and so different. I mean, he had different attack in every match against the best guys in the country. Yeah. And you watched that and you saw what he was capable of. And his best wrestling was definitely in that tournament. Those guys brought the best out of him. And then now all of a sudden, you're the best guy on the team. You're the highest finish ever in freshman in history of Rutgers as a freshman. And now you're ranked, 3rd in the country coming in, and you've never gone through a full Big Ten season.
Right.
So now you have to go through a Big Ten season with all this expectations and pressure, and that makes it even harder to go through the first season. I never went through a Big Ten season. I don't know what it's like, but I can imagine, and then having to go through that with all the pressure, I'm sure that was very hard on him. And you could see it did wear on him. It wore on him mentally. You could see it sometimes, but it still takes nothing away from that NCAA tournament that John had. No matter who was there, there was the only schools that weren't there was Ivy.
The Ivies weren't,
and there was only maybe one kid that would have made it top 8. He took 4th. He didn't just sneak on the podium.
No, and I remember your first match that year. You were still 17.
Yeah.
You were still 17.
Yeah.
Because you don't turn 18 till May that year.
Wow.
Yeah, right. But he beat a guy and I'll never forget it. Ammo calls me up, and we're we're kind of like going, and I'll never forget this, and I'll say this. He Mike, we love him, right? I says, nah, dude, like I think he's gonna finish top 3 or top 4. Now I was naive because I had no clue what I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
And Mike's like, from your mouth to God's ear, and he's like, he's wrestling a guy who's 25, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't care. Like that guy from Oklahoma.
Yep, Gear.
He was
Dakota
like,
Gear. Yeah,
he was like 25 years old. He was like a 5th, 6th year
Wrestled
senior.
twice too that tournament.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm naive.
beat him
I'm
up
like
the second time.
I'm just like, dude, he's gonna win.
Yeah,
he's gonna win. And listen, we can get into the semifinals and stuff like that. I still think he got screwed, but that's
listen. That guy just won a world title.
He did. I just saw. When you look at that group that you came out of, you had national champions, world title. I mean, you were wrestling some of the best at that point in time.
Brooks in the Olympics
at 17 years old.
Yeah,
like you were 17 when you wrestled those guys.
Yeah.
It's nuts. And I know this isn't about you, but it's just it's a topic.
No,
that's
but you know
up.
what? Talking about John is the same. It's everybody that talks about John always knows that he's affiliated with Yale Street.
Right.
Like Chance Marsteller, I just ran into him at a tournament last week, and he knows I'm a coach at Yale Street. We're talking. He's like, hey man, he's like, Pod's still with you guys. Everybody knows that John was a Yale Street guy because he was loyal to our program, always posting stuff on his Instagram, and everyone knew that was our guy. And so it's something that I enjoy talking about because it shows that you can reach that level training with us. Not everybody, he broke the mold. Not everybody bought into us because you had these other clubs that were already established and some names that people were attracted to, that the already the high level wrestlers, they don't know nothing about Yale Street. So I'm going to go to Buxton because he's established, or I'm going to go to the Edge because the Edge has been around for a while and they're a great club, and maybe not take a chance on Yale Street. But now we prove that if you're that dedicated and you want to reach the highest levels, you can training at Yale Street, and John proved that. So we're grateful for that.
I think it all started in the garage with Zawena, Jake Smith, all those guys.
Fischetto, used to go at it with those guys.
Group,
Yep.
Those older guys really kind of helped me get to where I am, going into high school, because I was going with high school guys when I was in middle school.
Yeah,
wrestling with you when I was 160, 145, and Dan. Then I got Shane, and I would go at 6 a.m. some days during COVID in his garage.
Yep.
But just all those workouts, the family, you said it's not, I think it still has that family feel, even though we're getting so much bigger.
Yeah.
I think it'll always have that family mentality behind the club. And
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. You know, there's a lot of clubs out there that I think are very good.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of clubs out there that aren't very good. And you just have to, for parents to be able to filter, you know. But we know that we're very confident in our program. I would challenge you now, especially now with John on the staff.
Right.
I would challenge anybody to find a better staff. Find a better staff than what we have. I mean, with the 5 coaches on the staff, and not including Clint Motter, who is also a very good Division I wrestler, we've got over 300 Division I wins on this staff.
Right.
Division I wins, you know, so that says a lot. I don't think there's many staffs out there that can challenge that.
No, and I can certainly speak to the loyalty as well, because from my perspective, you know, with the work we've done and how that continued to grow, and you know, I think programs, coaches, most of us do this because we love what we're doing and we want to help people. But I would be naive to think that you do have to sometimes catch a break and get that one individual.
Yeah.
And I know that for me, it was, you know, I say this jokingly times, but you know, when I finally turned to social media and I put that one video up of us training and the credibility of my training, I can debate this too. I was still the same person then as I, you know, but that one video took off because then people saw it and said, wait, oh, he trains with him.
He trains there, yeah.
Oh, now, you know, we need to look in that direction. I don't like that it kind of went that way, but that's just sometimes the way life is.
What was the line I said earlier? It's not the card. You can't change the cards you were dealt. It's just the way you play them. You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great line, you know, but that goes to like when we first started the club, and now I'm revisiting ideas. You know, I said I don't want to be one of those coaches because it's all over Instagram. This guy wins a state title. How many different club coaches got their arm around him, taking a picture? 4 different club coaches. This is our guy. This is our guy. It's not your guy. These other coaches are saying that it's his guy. I don't want that to be Yale Street. So when John Paz won a state title, when Logan Wadle won a state title, there were no other coaches posting pictures and putting their arm around those guys. And while we might not be pumping out state champs every year, you know that when we get a state champ, he's a Yale Street guy to the core, you know?
Yeah. So it's celebrating the accomplishment of the athlete.
Yeah.
You know,
and the program.
And that's, you know, that's the same thing. That's how I look at it. You know, when I'm posting about the athletes I'm training, or like Saturdays in the fall are busy because of all the football guys I've trained, and I'm posting they're like, hey, they're playing today or stuff like that. I'm not doing that for me. I sincerely mean that. I want to celebrate them, their hard work.
It's about them.
Their accomplishment. Yeah.
That's it.
I happen to train them.
Right.
But you know, I'm going to celebrate them because they're deserving of it.
Yeah. Well, we post a picture every time somebody wins a tournament. We post it on Instagram.
Yeah.
So even if it's like the least competitive tournament, and this kid nobody even knows who this guy is. He won a tournament. He deserves to be celebrated for that.
100%.
So
I agree with that.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I'm very excited to be part of the staff. Thank you for, bringing me on.
I mean, we're happy you chose to stay with us. I mean, I had no doubt that you would, but I know you had offers to go other places. And, you know, I wanted to make sure that we were able to keep you in our program, because that's what we always planned on doing. So, yeah, I mean, and everybody, all the coaches, even if you talk to the other coaches, that, hey, if somebody's got to take a pay cut here or there, they would all sign up for it to keep John, you know.
Well, it goes back to that loyalty, and that's a trait that's fading fast.
100%, dude. It's
fading fast.
It's crazy, man. It is.
Yeah, you see that like we said before, college athletics, someone's going to go from this school to that school, this school, that school. There's no more loyalty.
The way the rules are now, it encourages you to not be loyal.
Yeah.
You know, like you get a kid that's not a blue chip recruit. He comes to your program and he develops under you and your coaches, and then he goes to nationals and he's a blood rounder. And now he's got Iowa coming at him, throwing him a bag of money. And now you got to actually pay this kid to keep him in your program that he's good because of you. And now you have to pay him for that. That is really bad.
Yeah.
Really bad for society. So
what legacy do you want to leave through Yale Street Wrestling Club and the work you've done throughout the sport?
I mean, I don't know. In my job as a police officer, we hear that word thrown around a lot. It's like, legacy, like there's guys that say, I want my legacy to be this. It's like, dude, you're just a number. You're just a number in a police department, and you're not going to have a legacy when you leave. Go retire and be happy with what you did. And I think that's kind of how I feel about that. Like, I just want, if there is a way for what I want people to say that I did my best to help their kids reach their full potential, and I did it honestly. Like, I don't hold anything back. I don't try to hide anything. I'm sometimes brutally honest with people to a fault, where I might lose clients because of it. But my whole thing is, I want people to just know that I was an honest guy, and I did it for the right reasons, and I did it just to help. You know, sometimes I'm telling parents to do stuff, and they're like, the reaction I'm getting from them, like, do you guys realize, like, I just want to help you? Like, if you don't want to listen to me, that's fine. Like, I don't, but I'm just trying to help here. You know, we don't need to argue. I don't need to argue with you on why you should listen to me. You don't want to listen to me, that's perfectly fine. But, like, that's all, man. And I think that there's so much more so now than anything. Maybe social media has something to do with it, but, you know, and I speak for my coaches. My coaches, all the coaches on our staff are all on the same page too. That's the most important thing. Like, I wouldn't be able to do this without these coaches. Right. You know, John's included in that now. But Dan Hilt, Shane Mallory, Pete Teresa, you know, those guys are phenomenal. And we're all on the same page. Like, you hear people say, oh, we never fight. Yeah, you hear like married couples say, oh, we never fight. You're like, yeah, okay. We really never fight. Like, there's not many disagreements that we have. And if I say something and somebody has a different like opinion, I listen to them and I'm like, yeah, all right, well, let's do that then, you know? So everybody knows that we can share our opinions and we'll come to an agreement. And very rarely do we disagree on philosophies when it comes to this sport. So that's something I'm grateful for.
Well, I think what's important is I've been to your facility once or twice. I've seen how you run things there. You have a structure. You know, your coaches are expected to work within that structure, but I think they have a little bit of freedom to put their own flair to it.
100%.
You know, and that's important.
Yeah.
But as long as the message is the same and it's getting out there and they're being taught how to do things a certain way, that's how you create the cohesiveness and the family and that environment that you were speaking of earlier. It's when you've got 5 people in the room doing 5 different things, that's when you got a problem.
Yeah, no. And, you know, look, I've been around programs, not just in wrestling, but in police work, where you have micromanagers. And, you know, I hired you to be a coach. I'm going to let you coach. I'm not going to stand on top of you and tell you how I want you to do it. You're going to do it your way. I got to give you the freedom to do it your way. Right. I've been around a lot of leaders in organizations that were the opposite of that, and they were micromanagers. So I realized, like, that's not the way I want to run this thing. And so that's where I think, and also just having confidence in our staff. Correct. Like, John's new to coaching. You know, I mean, he started a while ago, maybe a year or two, but like, he's a fairly new coach. But nobody's on top of him. Like, watching, we know that he's going to get better as he goes, and he's really good now. I mean, I get really good reports from parents and other kids about John, the practices that he runs, the privates that he does. You know, I've never heard a bad word about him. Everything is so positive and just compliments him all the time. And like, I know that. Like, I get those, and I expect that because I know how good he is. You know. Well,
it doesn't hurt too that he's been a part of your family. For a while too.
He knows what we're trying to.
You know, he's been there. You know, a lot of coaches use the similar term, but I believe it's the University of Minnesota's football coach. They have the row to boat mentality. You know, where everybody's pulling the oars in the same direction.
Okay.
And I think that's what, you know, that's in the perfect, although I don't believe in that perfect scenario, that's what you want. You want everyone pulling in the same direction, questioning things. You don't want yes men. You know, you want to be challenged, but it's done in a respectful way where it's not always a no.
Yeah.
You know, where you'll try something and give it a shot, and if it doesn't work, but at least that person knows, hey, I have an idea. I'm not going to go talk to Donnie because no matter what I tell him, he's not going to listen to me.
No. There's got to be conversations.
Right.
There's got to be conversations. I like that analogy of the rowing the boat because that's what it feels like when we're doing. We were just in Pennsylvania, and you know, myself, Dan Hilt, and Pete Teresa were on that trip, and we're getting to the point now, like, because of my kids, you know, when we travel, we tend to stay with all the other kids and parents. And it's been fun, you know, to do that. But now, like this past weekend, we were not at the same hotel as the parents. And that was the first time in a long time. And it was so productive for us to just be with each other, talking about the day's events and maybe what adjustments we got to make for tomorrow and maybe what practice plans we got to implement this week to fix those things. And so like that's how we communicate. Like it's everybody gets their thoughts out on the table. Yeah. And, you know, I love it. And we all agreed like maybe we need to do this more often where when we're working, because we are working on these trips, when we come back, maybe it's better that we're not surrounded by all the parents and we can just get, you know, focus on each other and what we need to talk about and get stuff done. You know, it's kind of the best time to do that. But that's what this program is all about. It's coaches communicating with each other and figuring out what we need to do.
We asked this question to all of our guests. What is one piece of advice you'd give your past self, kind of what you would want for to go on the rest of your life?
What piece of advice I would give my past self?
Yeah. With what you know today, if you can go back to a younger Donnie, what would you tell him?
Make your time count. I mean, I wasted so much time doing things that I shouldn't have been doing that really, not that I shouldn't have been doing, but that weren't productive, that weren't making me a better person. You know, I could have been reading. I could have learned how to play the guitar. You know what I mean? Like
he brought up reading. You know how much I love reading.
Like video games and just stuff like that. Just like, you know, looking back on the time that I wasted that could have been making me just a better overall person. And I try to get that through to my kids. Right. Like they come down in the morning, they get up an hour before they got to go to school, and they come down and they throw the TV on and they just mope on the couch for an hour. I'm like, dude, you guys could be practicing guitar. You guys could be doing push-ups and sit-ups. You guys be doing something productive. Use this time productively, you know? So that would probably be my biggest regret is just the amount of time that I wasted doing nothing when I could have just been doing something to better myself, you know?
With all the noise that's out there in the ether of our universe today, what, you know, looking into the camera, what advice would you, twofold, what advice would you give the kids today who are in high school, and then subsequently the parents as they're going on this journey, hopefully moving forward?
It's difficult because I didn't grow up with social media.
Yeah, neither did I.
You know, and you know. So John seems to handle himself pretty well with social media. I think you manage that a lot. But, I mean, I don't know. There's probably pressures and anxieties that you've developed, too, from just being on it. I feel it as a business owner. Right. Like, there's times I'm not thinking of something, and then I'll scroll through. I'm like, oh, no, now I'm thinking about that. Right. You know, now I'm thinking about keeping up with that program or doing this. So, I mean, I guess the thing that I would say is really don't let social media control you. You control social media. And there's a lot of people that put stuff on social media, as we just saw within the past week with what happened to Charlie Kirk. There's people that are sharing their opinions, and some of them are getting fired for it. Right. Some of them are, you know, just lay off that. Like, you know, if it's not something that you're gonna, if it's something that you might regret later on, just hold off on posting it. Especially even like when you're competing. And there's other kids that like these kids are all friends with the guys that they got to compete against. Like, you're following the guy that that might be ranked number 1 and you're ranked number 2, and you're following him on social media and you're seeing everything that he's doing. I don't know if that's great for you. I don't know if that's the best thing to do. Yeah. You know, or posting stuff that you think the other guy's going to see. Like, don't get caught up in that. I imagine it's tough nowadays, but I think that in our society today, I think that's a big thing. Is just we don't know where this is going. Right. I mean, but I think the best thing is to just make sure that you have control of what you're doing on social media, because there's college coaches that are following. There's police officers that are following in your town. If you're posting stuff that isn't good, they might not want you on their team. They might not recruit you because they see you posting some controversial stuff. So just be smart about what you're doing.
You bring up a very good point. I never thought of it from this perspective. You have so many kids that are playing their respective sports at their schools, but how many of them cross over and are on club teams from all different schools? So, you know, in wrestling's like that, but I know lacrosse, soccer, baseball, like all these sports go across that. So you're technically combatants, you know, in a Westfield Governor Livingston type of a situation.
But you train together at the club.
But you train together at the club, or you're on the same travel team for your respective sport or club team outside of that. So yeah, I never looked at it from that perspective. That's a pretty interesting point. Well,
yeah, I think you know, as far as that goes too, it's like You know, you want to be able to train with these guys, but like what I tell, even with coaches, like I have coaches in our program that coach at high school.
Right.
So something, you know, 2 or 3 of them coach on the high school level. We have a rule that if you're coaching for Governor Livingston and Governor Livingston's wrestling Westfield, and there's a Yale Street kid on Westfield, don't coach against that kid.
Right.
Don't sit in the corner against that kid. And our coaches all respect that rule, and the coaches that they coach with respect that rule. So I think that's also more complicated for us too to navigate.
Sure.
But like, yeah, I mean, if you're one thing we like to do too is we help each other get better. But like, if you know you're gonna have to wrestle that kid to states, maybe during the season you back off.
Sure.
You know, we've had that in the past. Like maybe stay away from each other in the room for the last month or two before the states. So it is difficult to navigate through that. But at the end of the day, if you guys are training together for a certain amount of years, you're just making each other better. So be grateful for that guy.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, and and then the best guy wins.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it
best
comes
guy
down
wins
to.
at the end of the day. You know,
It's crazy, man. You know, not to bring everything back to my kids, but my son Dominic has a very good training partner named Andrew Elena, and those two wrestle every day, and they're so looking at them go. It's so much fun to watch them scramble. You know, Andrew, obviously, right? So they were in the same weight last year at the state tournament, and we didn't keep them apart.
Right.
We didn't, because they're only making each other better, and it's the kids' states. At the end of the day, it really doesn't mean anything, but. You know, it was like, I hope they don't have to wrestle each other.
Right.
I coach Dominic in every match. I wouldn't coach him against Andrew.
Right.
Because Andrew's our wrestler. He's my guy too. You know, so that would have been difficult, but it's sometimes you can't avoid it. But in the big picture, look at Kyle Dake and David Taylor. I mean, those guys had the rivalry like no other, and now they're in each other's wedding parties when they get older, you know?
Well, you had the brothers in this past NCAA tournament
the Stout brothers,
that wrestled each
Yeah.
other, you know, and
it was tough to watch, man.
I mean,
it was tough to watch.
like there's nothing you can do. You're representing your schools. You're in the biggest tournament of your sport.
Nothing
I mean,
you can do.
How many times did those guys go at it? You know, and what do you?
The
you know,
bracket just shakes.
It's just the way it was.
Yeah.
Well, Donnie, we want to thank you for coming in and being a part of our journey.
Thank you, man. This is
here.
awesome.
Yeah.
You know, continued success with Yale Street and all your wrestlers, and keeping this guy in line over there as well. But I like he's like a little brother to me. I didn't have a brother, so I need someone to kind of like
John's the best.
jab
Dude.
a little bit.
John keeps us in line.
Yeah.
We don't have to keep him in line.
Believe me, I can relate to that too. But you know, once again, that's a wrap on episode 36 of Destination Talk. Until we see you again.